If you're within 7 years of retiring, you're entering one of the most important planning windows of your lifetime. There's a lot of questions that have to be answered leading up to retirement, and the time to start answering those questions are now. Things like, how do I continue to grow my money up until retirement and through it? Things like, how do I start creating income inside my portfolio so that I can fund withdrawals? Those are all important questions that take a lot of planning to answer, and being proactive is really important. It's why we call the 7-year window leading up until retirement the risk zone. The planning decisions that you make during this time period have major impacts on your income, on portfolio, on your taxes, and will ultimately have a big impact on your long-term confidence inside your retirement plan. So let's talk about some of those questions and some of those topics that you need to think through as we lead into the 7 years going into retirement. The first thing that we need to think about is sequence of return. And that's kind of a finance nerd term that may make sense to some people and may seem like a foreign language to others. But what sequence of return risk means is just that the market doesn't consistently give us the same return year after year after year. The stock market, even if it averages, say, 8% a year, it does not give us 8% followed by 8% followed by 8%. Instead, what we get is this roller coaster ride where the market sometimes gives us 24% in one year, and then we lose 8% the next, and then the next year we're positive 16%. And the next year we might not earn anything. And that roller coaster ride doesn't matter quite as much when you're in the accumulation phase, when you're saving for retirement, when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s and you're still saving for retirement. That roller coaster ride doesn't matter quite as much. It may still be emotionally difficult to see your 401k or 403b drop in value, but in the big picture of things, the market dropping in a year, as long as it recovers shortly thereafter, doesn't have a huge impact. But when we start talking about retirement planning, if you're within that 7-year risk zone of leading up to retirement, sequence of returns start to matter. That roller coaster ride starts to matter. Because if we have a market drop at the wrong time, it could impact your retirement plan rather significantly. Think about if we had a market downturn a year or maybe even 6 months before your retirement date. If the market dropped by 20, 30, certainly 40%, it would assuredly move back your retirement date and not allow you to retire when you had planned for. And so making sure that we're proactive and looking at the potential for sequence of returns, making sure that we have an income plan in place, and making sure that we've intentionally created a portfolio allocation that takes that into account and provides enough liquidity is really important. However, in the opposite end of that, we still need growth inside the portfolio. We can't just move to a completely safe, conservative savings account portfolio because that doesn't allow for the growth that's still needed during retirement. Retirement can be a long period of time. Many people retire for 30 or even 40 years. And over that time span, things like inflation erode the purchasing power of your account. Things could cost twice as much at the end of your retirement as they do in the beginning. And so making sure that we continue to concentrate on growth, that your portfolio continues to grow while still taking into account sequence of return is an important kind of combination that, again, there's a tension there, but we've got to make sure that we balance it appropriately. One of the keys to balancing that is making sure that we make these strategy changes proactively before volatility happens. If the market's dropped by 10, 20, or 30%, many times it's too late to make some of these changes. And we're kind of scrambling to fix some of these situations. Instead, we want to make some of these changes earlier before this volatility happens. And that's why we look at this 7-year time span. It's why we have this risk zone time span. We want to start making proactive changes before we have to, before the market's dropped, so that we have plenty of time to make sure that we're being proactive and not being reactive to what the market gives us. It also has the benefit of changing our mindset when markets do drop. If we haven't been proactive about our strategy, if we haven't made sure that we've taken into account sequence of return, the market starts to drop and we start having to be scared, having to be reactive, having to sell out when the market's down. But if we've been proactive and we have the correct allocation in place, when the market drops, instead it starts to create buying opportunities where we can look for ways to even elevate the portfolio growth a little bit more. Another part that's really important about this 7-year risk zone that we start talking about is making sure that your tax planning is on track. Taxes have a huge impact on retirement, and you actually have more control in retirement than many times you do during your working years on how much taxes you're paying and when you recognize taxable income. And many of the strategies that work the best in retirement can't be implemented after you retire. Instead, we have to start implementing them beforehand. Again, typically within a 7-year time span is kind of that perfect window. And so making sure that we have the right allocation between pre-tax and post-tax, making sure that we have income that's available and liquid, that creates the right taxable income strategy for us when we start to retire, are all really important concepts. It becomes difficult to balance that with the investment strategy, but that's where Straight Path can really help. At Straight Path Wealth, we've created a team that specializes in all of those areas that we talked about. We understand sequence of return and how to protect against it. We understand the growth that we still need in your plan. And we understand how the taxes impact retirement. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to you and what you want and a plan that's customized to you. One thing that doesn't work in retirement is picking a plan that's similar just because of the age that you're in. So if we start picking a plan just because you're 60 or just because you're 65, and we assume that you're going to look like every other 60-year-old or every other 65-year-old, and your tax plan and your investment strategy is based on that, the plan is much more likely to fail. Instead, it needs to be customized to your retirement plan, the income that you need, the withdrawal strategy that's best for you. And that customization is a really important part to long-term confidence, keeping your taxes lower, and making sure that you're in a good position no matter what the market does. And again, that's where Straight Path helps. And so I really encourage you, if you're in that risk zone, if you're within a 7-year time span before you retire, this is the time to reach out to an advisor. This is the time to reach out to someone here at Straight Path to make sure that we take advantage of these 7 years, and these don't turn into a 7 years you regret, but instead turn into the best planning period that we could have. It sets you up well for taxes, investments, the return, and ultimately a successful retirement.